throughout the profession. Most of the learning and development, product development even, is actually done through projects. And that's why it's exciting to look at all these interesting projects, because they really are offer an opportunity to move things forward. And for us, we are traditionally a contractor, so that's the background of the company. And we now have a factory. So we are at a transitional stage culturally between being a contractor and being a manufacturer, and we're still trying to figure out what exactly it means to be a manufacturer. But for us, the two things go together, because the manufacturing capability came as a sort of in response to a need from the construction groups, because they were beginning to want to move things off-site. Maybe that's when we have a look. Oops, this is a pointer.
Yes.
Okay. I put this couple of slides there just because this is one of our recent projects. It's the cheese grater in Leaden Hall building. It's just a screenshot from YouTube. So I'm not going to show you the YouTube film because it's there on YouTube, so you can have a look at it. But this movie, and you see that's a BIM model, in fact, that you're looking at the building simulated there in front of the Gherkin. And all the work that's shown in this video was done as part of the bidding process. So we were doing a full BIM model and developing structural solutions and alternatives to how to improve the construction site and the programming, all before we even got the job. And that tends to happen a lot, and we do tend to use BIM modeling for that. So we are able to simulate how we, or to plan, explore how we're going to build things on site. And it's through these big, challenging projects that we really develop lots of ideas, or start ideas, or identify things that could be taken offline and developed further. And that's pretty much the area that I work. Now, another thing that has intrigued me in this process is sometimes you do come across a lot of fantastic ideas through these special projects, but how do average projects then benefit from all of this? And I have been thinking about it for some time, in particular when people like to talk about where is the construction going now, where is it moving, and they're obviously thinking about this project, but also thinking about the everyday project on a very low budget that needs to be done in a different way. So we talk about moving to off-site, because we know that we reduce CO2 emissions, water consumption, and waste to landfill, because site activities are notorious for those things. They're difficult to organize, wasteful process. So we have measured those particular items on some of the sites where we are doing more off-site construction. And we have already verified that there is a significant saving in CO2, water, and waste. Now, okay, this is because we're measuring the activity on site. And of course, there is activity that's been transferred to factories and off-site. But we know also that in the factory, the waste is close to zero, and it's a much more sustainable operation altogether in terms of energy consumption. So moving activity off-site is definitely the thing we want to do. Now, people in the construction industry like to quote the car industry, because over the past maybe 10, 20 years, they have improved the quality and lowered the cost, and they make, obviously, cars today are much more sophisticated than they were 10 years ago. I know that for sure, because I kept a car for 10 years, and when I changed, I couldn't believe the gadgets that came with it, and it was like normal. And all my friends were saying, where have you been for the last 10 years? That's what cars are like. But if at the same, more or less at the same time, we got a new flat. And basically, well, the only fancy thing you've got is lighting control. Basically, you can dim the lights in a number of different ways. And that's about it when you compare with, you know, my previous flat, which was last century. So with incremental improvements. So there has been a huge change in manufacturing of cars. And in the construction industry, the statistics are that the prices have gone up, not down. So that is particularly frustrating and intriguing. Whilst we are doing those fantastic buildings, the technology isn't moving to the day-to-day buildings as fast as it could. So that's what I have been looking at. In this example, you see those steel assemblies. This is Ascot racecourse. And those were made off-site, the steel frames, and they were brought to site assembled. But from our point of view, the reason why they were done like that is because it would have been a nightmare to bring all the bits of metal and try to weld it into that shape at that height with all the. Basically, it was impractical. So that's why, and that's what's been happening. We have been doing a lot of off-site, driven by the need. It's difficult to get to the place, the site location, or the design is such that you wouldn't be able to do it there. So, and then we thought, okay, so that's what we'll be doing. But and we also, sometimes we come across a very straightforward building, and I'm talking about from a contractor's point of view, when we already receive a design pretty much done. So sometimes you can sort of take it into pieces that can be assembled as components. But really the big difference is when designers start designing for manufacturing. So the examples we've seen today where there is a lot of collaboration are good examples of that way of working. And the more designers become aware that design for manufacturing and assembly is about understanding what the manufacturing capabilities are for that particular type of design or technology or materials. And it varies from different types of materials. So 2 years ago, I was asked to come up with a standard design for our schools. We were doing then a number of schools through the BSF program. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a kind of private and public partnership where the contractor comes to the project very early on, before it starts. It's part of the team. So you actually have an opportunity to work with the team to influence the design. Okay, so, we were very frustrated about the first few schools we delivered because they were all completely different, and the learning from one project was obviously not passed around to the next project. And traditionally, there isn't really, when you think about it, there isn't a mechanism for carrying the knowledge from project to project very much, other than what goes with the person that was there on another project and moves on to a next project. But there isn't really an industry way of carrying that forward. So I started looking at what was it about the various projects we had that was so frustrating. And I looked at 24 projects that we had at the time on our drawing boards and on site. And basically they were just whatever that particular team felt appropriate for that project. They are small projects, schools, a fairly low budget, and getting even lower now with the new government. But when you see Zaha Hadid's school that just won the Sterling Prize, the budget for an average BSF school is less than half of the budget for that school. So you can have an idea of what we're talking about. You really have to be very lean and clever to be able to deliver the quality of the learning environment that the kids deserve for so little money. So you can't really afford to start learning on the project every time. So I started looking at it. And I realized that basically you didn't have to standardize the design or the plan or the massing of the building. And these 4 BIM models are 4 examples of standardized school design. So hopefully they don't look like each other. And I don't think they do. But they all have the same, they carry the learning that we gathered from our experience of working with precast and off-site assemblies. So if I just show you some of these are 4 pictures of different sites of schools, but they could be the same site because they are all being done with the same technology. It's all based on precast slabs, precast structural walls, and also precast facades, precast shafts and staircases. So basically these components, they are factory made, and the slabs are made by robots. So provided that the digital data goes through, the actual shape of the building is neither here nor there from the robot's point of view. Obviously, if every piece is different, it's harder for the guys on site to figure out which goes where, or if there is a damage, you can't replace that piece. So there is still an advantage in having some standardization. And we end up with quite clean soffits and modular service distribution and structural facades. Again, those are all different buildings. Obviously, each one has its own facade. The first 2 buildings have just been completed and handed over using this standard approach. That's one of them, and that's the other one. On the left-hand side, the BIM model. And that's still on site, and this one is also on site. And you can see how the way that this is built. And you have very few people on site, very fast construction. The traditional way of building would take 80 weeks, and with this way of building, it takes about 52. So we're coming down to an academic year. You can move into your new school just over a year after closing the old one. So this is definitely the way that we want to go, and the quality of the internal environment is that much better than what you would be able to afford on that low budget if you didn't use the lean and smart ways of building. So what we're trying to do for these small projects is to try to learn from the learning that happens on the big ones and see how much we can then carry it into our day-to-day projects. Thank you.
Okay, and our final speaker for today, I would like to introduce Gary Davis, who's the Director of Marketing, if I got that right, for Zahner Architectural Metals. Gary has over 16 years of experience in the metals industry, and combined with his knowledge of rain screen building envelope theory, is well respected for his abilities to understand and solve complex architectural design problems. Zahner has been engineering and producing advanced sheet metal surfaces for over 100 years.